Favorite part here in your house?
Well, you know, having grown up as a student, I got used to living in one room. So I have my desk in my bedroom. So that I basically spend most of my time when I'm in the house. I got COVID, so if you're not feeling bad, you don't really worry about it. I knew I was better because I was getting very bored, and just think, when can I get out of here? When can I get out of here?
Do you have a morning routine po? Sir
Well,
Bob?
yeah. But after cleaning my teeth, I go straight to the computer and look messages and answer my mail and see what's happening, what I missed from the night before.
So hindi
wanted
kayo nagbe-breakfast, Sir Bob?
I fast.
Is that the intermittent
In the
fasting?
intermittent fasting. Yeah, it seems to work for me. Sometimes I forget that I fasted and haven't eaten, and I'll go and exercise.
What's your exercise?
And he would exercise at least an hour a day, sometimes twice a day.
So you would see him exercise when you were
He would
regularly?
He would bring us to the gym. He said, "Come," when we were little.
Since you talked about your father, when you were born, he was already in politics.
Born, yeah. Actually, I think he was always in politics, at least in his. When I became governor of Ilocos Norte, I got to talk. Since I was spending all my time there, I got to talk to some of his friends and the people who were around him when he was still living in Ilocos. And they said, 16 years old pa lang yan, may kabinete na yan.
Really?
Oo. Talagang my father is one of those, I suppose, the most single-minded person I've ever known. If it had nothing to do with his work, he just wouldn't spend time on it.
Saan po kayo pinanganak?
San Juan? No, pinanganak ako doon. So we lived in our house, which is still there, until 1965, when he won the presidency, and we moved na to the palace.
He won his presidency in 1965. You were 7 years
Yeah,
old.
because I remember my first birthday in the palace was my 8th birthday.
What was that like?
Oh, it's amazing because my dad brought me to school, and he said, "Come, it's your birthday, I'll bring you." So he brought me, and I cannot forget, and my classmates cannot forget. There were those two yung ice cream. Nagdebenta ng sorbetes, Magnolia, and then Selecta pa noon, hindi ba?
Yes.
So dalawa sila. So my dad made it Pacquiao. He said, we paid them some money, and he said, lahat ng hihingi ng ice cream, libre ah.
Anong school po kayo pumapasok
Lasal
nun?
Green Hills. In Ortigas, yeah.
So at 8 years old, you already lived in the palace.
Mm-mm.
What was that like, growing up in Malacanang, in the palace?
Well, in the early days, masaya kasi ang daming
Kaya, daming rooms, ang laki.
ang daming pupuntahan, ang daming mong, you go down to the kitchen, you mess around with the cooks, and then you go to the CQ, you mess around with them, you play with them, you go to the park. So there's many places to go.
Anong favorite place niyo nun sa Malacanang?
I used to end up hanging out with the CQ all the time. I guess with the guys, you know. The palace was so interesting. But as the time went on, the private part of the palace became smaller and smaller, and the office part of the palace became bigger and bigger. That was at one time. So I said, okay, that's not happening again. You do not leave your room until you're
Fully
completely, you're ready to see people. The thing was study hard. Yun lang talaga. Basta work hard, study hard. That was his main thing. As long as you're studying hard, you're okay with him.
You got a lot of his traits. Kasi nga, di ba, you grew up watching him sa stage, giving speeches. So, marami sa mannerisms niya. Even yung size niya, nakuha niyo.
Yeah,
Yung
ang
waist.
katawan namin is remarkably similar. From Susan, when binibigyan siya ng regalo, no, I would raid his closet. My mannerisms, especially speaking, is very much my dad's. But syempre, from the time I was very small, we were already there in the back watching him make speeches. And he would teach a little bit about modulation and everything, but voice modulation and things like that. But mostly, what he would insist upon when we started having to speak was that learn it, don't read. The thing that's also that everybody says is my voice. is that we have the same voice.
Di ba po when your dad was a president, sinasama niya kayo sa lahat ng kanyang mga visits in different parts of the world, and you have met some of the most powerful and influential people. You have even met the royal family.
Yes. Some of the funnest parts would be we'd go, I'm going to see the Pope. Sama kami. I think it was a conscious effort of my parents to expose us, because even the travel, like they would go to the provinces, or they would go to, especially yung mga Baguio, yung mga ganon, sinasama lagi kami. We were always there. So I think it was my parents that they really wanted us to see everything.
Sino po yung na-meet nyo that made a huge impact in your life na hindi nyo makakalimutan?
Madami masyado. I've met most of the popes. I've met most of the Secretary Generals of the UN. In fact, I've met them all since youthant. Si Indira Gandhi was one who really impressed me, and Maggie Thatcher.
What do you think is the greatest lesson that you've learned from your father?
Oh my, I learned so much from him, it's hard to. When it comes to work, marami siyang, like things like when you walk into a room, the guy, if you're walking to a negotiation, whoever knows more wins. So I've always held that. Always work hard. Hard work is always rewarded. Things like that. He was not the type to sit you down and say, ano mo, anak, ang ganito, ganyan. Hindi, basta say, ito yung gagawin natin. He would be with his cabinet members, and they would be talking about something pretty important. And he would suddenly turn to me, what do you think? Like,
Ilan taong kayo?
I was 16, 17. He was already turning to me and said, what do you think? But when he asks you a question, it's not because he wants to know the answer. He wants to know if you know the answer. He's testing you. Kasi inaaral na niya yan, alam na niya yan. So, come prepared.
From your mother naman po?
From my mother, well, of course, it's the certain things. My love of music, of the arts. Because our house always had music playing. She was the one who used to take us to the theater, take us to museums. It really was her point of joy, really, was the arts. It wasn't normal. You didn't have there wasn't such a thing as a normal day. Every day was different. What formed the way I do things is how my father or my mother would react. It's having watched both of them handling the problems that they were confronted with on a daily basis. I think that's what really made my own personality when it came to such things. I would say that the many incidents that I watched them handle really taught me how to approach problems, how to take the challenges that inevitably come up.
Speaking of yung handling life situations and problems when people were marching towards EDSA, how did your father handle that situation?
My father called me and he said, we have intelligence that these people are moving, and this is what they're going to do. I'm assigning you to work with the security to handle the defense of the palace. So that's from that day on, that's all I was doing. From that point, that Wednesday afternoon, naka-uniforme na ako eh. Because I just come out of the military also at that time. Kaya ako linagay, sabi niya, ikaw ang in charge sa defense ng palasyo.
How was your father nung time po na yun?
So he reverted back to his commander mode, wartime commander mode. Again, very calm, very measured.
So nung nangyayari po yung rally sa EDSA, ano yung sinabi niya sa inyo?
I remember saying, yung kalaban, sabi, ginigera na tayo. And he answered me. He said, I have spent my whole life defending Filipinos. I cannot hurt them now. That was it. Baba, put your guns down. Say, we're not shooting anyone.
Were you scared nung time na yun?
No, I wasn't. I can't say as I was. Because militarily, we had an advantage. It's just he chose not to fight. And then they took us to Clark. When we got to Clark, dinisarmahan kami. Linipad na kami sa Guam. Which is what happened.
How was your father when you were in Guam?
He was ill. He wasn't well. He wasn't sleeping. But again, he was still his old self. He was in that mode. He was in commander mode.
Was there ever a time that he showed his vulnerability to you?
He's a professional, so basta kung anong kailangan gawin, gagawin natin. He didn't shirk away from any kind of challenge. Basta kung ano, hinaharap niya talaga. Basta the opposite of vulnerable.
Solution-based.
Oh, absolutely. Mission-oriented ang tawag sa military. Mission-oriented.
How was your last moments with your father?
Before he passed away.
They called us. I was in San Francisco, and the doctors started calling, and actually my sister said, "You better come back." So I rushed, took the first plane back to Hawaii, and that's it. And he had a kind of a seizure. His heart failed. And we were just watching. I remember I was hugging Irene, and we were looking, because we were asked to leave the room while the doctors attended to him. So we were watching him through the window.
What was his last words with you na tumatak sa inyo talaga before he passed away?
I remember just before he died, he opened his eyes and he just looked at me. And you're gonna make me cry. He just looked at me, and he closed his eyes again, and all the alarms went off. All the machines started beeping, and then all the nurses came in, all the doctors came in. We were hustled out of the room, and that was it. So there were no last words, but
There was that last look.
there was that last look that I will never forget. And God, look what you're doing to me. People will think I'm a crybaby.
It meant the world, that last look.